Welcome everyone to Politically High Tech with your host Elias. We have a newcomer here, and I think if you've been paying attention, there's a trend going on, and normally the right kind of has like a head start because they naturally come to me, but I don't know, that's changing a bit. The left actually got the head start this season. I didn't plan it. You can make all the conspiracy theories all you want. I didn't plan it this way. It just happened. Okay. And I'm fine with it. Like I said, I accept any political flavor, if you will, the left, the right, the green, the libertarian, or the non-affiliate who's tired of the political BS, if you will. So I welcome all of you here because, look, I pride myself of being friends of both sides of the aisle because they see me as a rational moderate, even though sometimes I could go a bit, sometimes my presentation could be a bit radical. That's why I curse both of them out for being idiots on some issues. But we don't know how to do that here. We're both mature adults here. So if you want entertainment and all that, go watch Fox News, go watch The Five or Greg Gutfeld or something like that. Or even Abby Phillips show if you want to watch arguments or things like that. Not going to happen here. It's not going to happen here. Maybe disagreement, which is fine. Disagreement doesn't equal hate. I got to keep saying that because people just treat disagreement as a middle finger or cursing your mother or father. That's not happening. People just have different points of view, okay? And I'm going to keep reminding that. I don't care if I sound like a broken record because the tribalism is just getting worse, not better, to be honest. Why even to some extent the state of local politics. I've been paying attention to local politics. The Democrats in New York City, it's a fight between the moderates and the progressives, and it's pretty vicious, to say the least. The fight doesn't always have to be between two different parties. It could be between the different tents within the party. True party politics, so. But we got someone here, and I'm going to nickname him the Missouri Progressive. You could correct me on that. Missouri is a red state, but before we start the recording, we just talked about how Missouri is slowly shifting blue, and I even noticed that, I would say, since 2024. I don't know what's been happening before that, but I know since last year I was noticing change because some Republicans are going extreme, especially they're trying to restore dueling. I read that. So, you could have definitely lose a stronghold if you keep pushing crazy stuff like this. I don't care how solid red or solid blue. If you keep pushing your luck, people will not put up with it. But anyways, I could drag on for an hour, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to torture my guests here and you with my random monologues. So I have Dan Schaefer here, and he is going to enlighten us of Missouri. Sadly, a state that gets overlooked, sometimes by me, I'm going to be honest, and I'm sure a lot of you too. But you don't have to admit it. I'll admit that for you. It's probably calling you out nicely, but oh well.
That's okay. We're a flyover state, so that's the way they look at us.
But we can learn something here. We could probably treat it as a case study, especially Missouri people, Missouri voters. Pay attention here. I don't, the red, the blues, or in between, wherever the heck you are. Pay attention here because you might learn something. All right, this is concerning Missouri, and if you want to just zoom out a bit, this can affect us even indirectly nationally as well. So, and they're overarching themes. You put two and two together, okay? So the first and super basic question is, what do you want the listeners and the viewers to know about?
Well, first of all, yes, you're right about Missouri here. I think we do get passed over a lot. We used to be a bellwether state. This is going back to like the 1990s. And in fact, I think we voted for Obama. I know the first time, like in 2008. I don't remember what it was in 2012. But yeah, so my name is Dan Schaefer. I'm running for the Missouri House of Representatives, District 97. I ran last semester. I almost said last semester. I'm going back to college here. I ran last November, and I lost. I got just over 35% of the vote, and I was running against a incumbent Republican. And even though I consider myself a native of Missouri, I also consider myself a native of California. Back in 1985, I graduated from college, had been in St. Louis for a couple of years after that, and decided I'm going to go to California for a couple of years and see what it's like out there. Well, a couple of years actually it turned out to be almost 30 years. So I lived in the Los Angeles area, which I watch with intense interest these days in what's going on in Los Angeles. And my son still lives out there, and I know a lot of people out there. And so I get the inside scoop there a little bit. But then I moved back to Missouri about 10 years ago. And, I worked as an engineer my whole life. I've been a technical guy, designing computer circuit boards, designing software. At one point, I decided to branch off and see how the other half lives. So I traveled with the sales guys for a while, did the field sales tech sort of thing. I did that for about 10 years, actually, and basically was a globetrotter. I visited many different countries throughout Europe and as well as Asia, South Asia, like India, Australia, Korea, etc. So gives me a lot of worldwide sort of globe-trotting experience, learning how to deal with people in different countries and learning how America is actually perceived in these different countries. Sort of an eye-opening experience for me. But I had my head down, interested in politics my whole life, but I had my head down, not really getting involved in it until I started doing my own podcast about 28, I think it was 2019 when I started doing my own podcast. I did about 200 episodes for under two different titles. And I got to talk to a lot of really interesting people out there. And I was surprised how easy it was to get some fairly popular guests on the show. But it was a learning experience for me. And then last year, it was about 1 year ago now, well, it's a little bit more than a year ago, I was calling the Democratic Party saying, how come there's nobody running against a Republican in my district? And they said, well, how would you like to run? So I did the Homer Simpson, oh, I shouldn't have said that. But I ran anyways. I had to clear it, with my wife because she's, going to be exposed to this as well. And we had fun with it. It was, it's difficult to push the Democratic perspective in a red state. And that's why I don't necessarily consider myself to be a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. I voted Republican before. I voted for Reagan in both terms. So I'm showing my age right now. I voted independent on a number of terms. And I still occasionally throw the switch for a Republican, not necessarily for president, on the local scene. Like if a Republican is doing a better job or if it's a better person, I'll throw the switch for them. So I consider myself a progressive person, but also when it comes to fiscal things, I consider myself conservative. So it's kind of a combination I think a lot of people are talking about these days, to be socially progressive and fiscally conservative. And you really don't fit into either party with that type of an attitude, but you fit better in the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party at this point, let's face it, in Missouri, they're kind of desperate for people to run. So they sign up a guy like me. But I like what I see so far. The Democratic Party's helped out quite a bit, and they know where I'm coming from. They know what kind of attitudes I have, and it's all over the internet. What I do. I do TikTok and do a lot of writing and stuff, so they know who I am and where I'm coming from. And let's see where it goes from here.
All right, great. You see, hear that? People, no one is 100% Republican or Democrat. They're lying to you, okay?
Right.
I mean, I'm just going to use me. If you hack into my voting records, I am as purple as heck. I voted Republican, I voted Democrat, I voted Independent. I just go out who I think is best. I don't care about partisan loyalty. I just think it just kills your IQ at best by 1/3. Worst case scenario, by probably 2/3. I don't believe in partisan loyalty. I'm proud to say that. Before I used to feel icky about this. Should I be a Democrat? Should I be a Republican just to fit it? But no. But I'm happy that I'm in the proud eye ever since I think after Donald Trump won the Republican, because I was a Republican for 2 years. I was like, I can't handle Trump. I think Trump's a little too crazy for me. So I've been the eye ever since. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah. I'm not comfortable voting for this. Republicans, what's wrong with you? You had better candidates. I was looking up to you. I liked the Ron Pauls, but you drove them away. I don't know. You did some stuff, but yeah, I can't prove it for sure. But enough of my yammering. Oh yeah, go ahead.
You did say something interesting, when you were talking in the beginning there, you were talking about how the Democrats, you'll have like the moderates versus the progressives within the Democratic Party, as if, that actually is the norm. I actually had an interview with a guy named Lee Drutman. He wrote a book called The Doom Loop, and he has his own podcast show. He has a PhD in political science. Very nice guy and very informative. But in the book, The Doom Loop, he writes extensively about how politics existed like back in the 90s. And people are confused because America only has two political parties. And it's that way because of the way we do this first past the polling type of voting, which is pretty archaic and antiquated. But regardless, the Republicans used to have their progressive wing and their conservative wing, as well as the Democrats. So you essentially had kind of four different parties within Congress. And that kind of kept things in balance. Nowadays, you're seeing a real stratification, a very vertical column. If you look at the Republican Party, if someone wants to run as a Republican, especially Republicans, to some degree Democrats, but more so with Republicans, you have to buy into their philosophy, hook, line, and sinker. And they're very a top-down organization. They create their messaging at the top and they push it down their channels all the way down to the bottom and eventually out to the constituents. And the way they're able to do that is they really control a lot of the media out there. Especially like if you go into rural areas here, you tune in your radio, 90% of your talk shows are conservative. And they're very religious as well, a lot of religious stations. And Republicans have glommed onto that very, very well. But what they've done is they've used it as a communication channel, a very vertically oriented communication channel. They pushed philosophy down that channel. Democrats, on the other hand, I think they try that. They fail at it miserably. And so I think what they're doing now, the word I get from Ken Martin, who is the chairman of the DNC, they're trying to do a bottom-up approach. They're saying, okay, we realize that people in New York, like your state, they have a different set of priorities. Missouri has a different set of priorities. Idaho has a different set, California. And so we can tolerate these differences. We can still make a party and tolerate these differences. There has to be some core ideas that tie you together, but they can tolerate the differences. And so I think that's a much more intelligent approach. It's far more subtle because messaging coming out in Missouri is not going to work in New York. It's not going to work in Idaho or California, but the core values are still there. And so I think that's the way to do it. And hopefully that'll be a way to go in the future. So I don't mean to ramble too much, but I just thought I'd throw that out there because politics is a lot different these days than it was, a century ago or even a half century ago.
Oh no, I don't think it's rambling. I think it's a bit enlightening. And I always say my biggest criticism of Democrats is you gotta hone in the messaging. And I think you point out something that the Republicans have a much more simpler, I don't want to say monolithic, but it seems that way. They have more of a simpler audience because they dominate the rural and the religious demographic. As opposed to Democrats, they have all kinds of ethnic groups, sexual orientations, you already said different priorities, but I think one of the core values is diversity, if you will. I think that's one of their more core values for the Democrat. That's why Democrats still have a lot of minority votes, even though Republicans have been creeping in on that.
Yeah.
Thanks to recent, results. Will it last? We'll find out. All I'm going to say is this, and this is a hot take. I think the MAGA base is very unique because once Trump is done, a lot of those votes are going to disappear. I think.
Yeah.
Because they're just for Trump, Trump, Trump. And that's the truth. I don't think the movement is sustainable. I could be wrong. I'm just making this claim, bro.
I tend to agree with you. I hate to use the word cult, but really the MAGA people they're based on personality. They call it a cult of personality. And anytime the leader of such a group dies or goes into obscurity or whatever, the group dissipates. They fight for a while to try to figure out, okay, who's going to be the next leader, but they never can fill the shoes of that first person. And everybody has that sense of perfection that first person had, despite all the flaws. So, I think that the MAGA base will drift. I don't think that when it comes to voting, I don't think they're going to go anywhere besides the Republican Party. They'll still probably vote with the Republican Party. But the MAGA extremists, they found their man in Trump. And that's just been my observation. You just, when he goes, the whole movement goes with him.
Except for that one time when he tried to push vaccines, who he got the biggest pushback. I never seen him cave so quick. Oh no, if you want. But he booed him so hard. I said, oh, they got you. They got you. They got you. Don't Trump, don't drift too far away. At least not in front of their faces. Maybe behind the scenes you can, but not in their faces because they will boo you instantaneously. I almost laugh. I try to be so mature about it. I'm not the biggest Trump hater, but I'm also not the biggest supporter either.
Yeah.
Because I just try to be as fair as I can be. I support Trump on certain things, but I'll say his first term Trump has definitely been better so far. I'm going to be honest, because it was more tamed and establishment Republicans sabotaged him, I think, in some of the right places. That's like good.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, okay, well, I think the Republican establishment could kind of, kind of tame him. But this time that's not happening because he made sure it was like the most loyal, not based on competence, based on pure loyalty. So that's a bit of a cult, you get rewarded for loyalty in
Yeah.
that sense. I mean, I don't agree with the whole fascist description. That part I'm stay away from. But cult, I agree with that more because I
Yeah.
think that's way too drastic. If he starts killing millions of people of certain demographics, then I will say, yeah, he is second coming of Hitler. But he has not done that, and I refuse to get down to that. Right? But cult, I could settle with. I'm fine with that description because it is a cult. I agree with that. So.
Yeah.
And as long as they keep saying fascist, fascist, I said stop. That's okay. That's too far. That's too far. But
Well,
cult, I agree with.
there is, I think, yeah, I think when you say fascist, it conjures up images of Hitler and Mussolini and so on. There's a part of people that don't want to believe that that'll ever happen, and that's also the mindset that took place in fascist regimes, right? So the Germans, from what I understand, they in their last election, Hitler was voted in by like 30% of the vote or something like that, which is exactly what Trump got last time. He got 30% of the vote from qualified voters. A whole bunch of voters didn't vote. You've there's that element that yeah, I agree. You don't want to necessarily label it as fascist, but you do want to keep an eye on it, because there are groups that are being targeted these days. The LGBTQ community, especially here in Missouri, they're being targeted to a huge degree. And it's obnoxious when you think about it because they're such a small part of society. They're, like 1%, but they're an easy target. And when that happens, when you start vilifying people for their personal choices, their religious choices, sexual orientation, color of their skin, and so on, that teeters on the edge of a really dangerous territory. And I don't know if you remember when who's that Don Lemon interviewed Trump way back in 2016, and that's that famous interview where Trump said, "Well, the Mexicans are bringing over rapists." And Lemon challenged him on a very, he's so meek, it's unbelievable. But he did challenge Trump on that one, and Trump said, "Well, someone's doing the raping." Well, when you get that sort of rhetoric started, it gets a lot of people saying, "Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah," and that builds on itself. That cascades into bigger things. So yeah, I would hesitate to call him a fascist at this point because it does tend to be an overused term. But I'm keeping an eye on the guy because I think it could go that way. So we have to be very careful.
I agree with vigilance. I'm not saying give him a pass because hell no on that one. No, be skeptical. Watch him, criticize him, call him out. I'm all for that. I'm not saying, Trump killed a guy. Oh, give free pass. He was defending himself. The guy did nothing. No, I will never push that. That's ludicrous. That's insanity. And I will never do that. No, I agree with being vigilant because cults is sadly a foundation for extremist radical movements that are destructive to society. I mean, generally speaking, I get that. But, and just like I said, cult is like, to me, that's the perfect description right now. At least to me. I'm sure the Trump supporters are gonna say, "Oh, look at these two, infected with Trump derangement syndrome." I said, no, I've praised Trump when he's correct. I mean, you can say that all you want. There's a comment section. Feel free to express that if you want. Go ahead. I don't care. I'm 1A. YouTube might censor you. I won't. So just be. I have it on one Rumble as well if you feel a little safer. Ironically, usually safe space for 1A. Oh god, the irony is rich. I got Rumble, which will eventually be uploaded to there. Put your comment there if you fear that YouTube's going to censor you. Because I'm 1A. I am definitely pro 1A. We all should be pro 1A, except if it generates violence. And of course, freedom of speech, not freedom of action. Hello. Speech is words. Or it could be, nonverbal communication. Yeah, it's communication, not violence. And then the 2A is more defensive, gathering arms and all that. It's not going out there actively shooting people that you don't like. If that was the case, America would cease to exist as a nation. Let's be perfectly honest, especially with some happy trigger people.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. You brought up two-way right here. The very first words in the Second Amendment are a well-regulated militia. So that it's funny how the what was that, DC versus Heller back in 2010, I think it was. I think it was Scalia that gave the majority comment on that. And I think he twisted himself into a pretzel trying to explain that one away because DC versus Heller, if I'm not mistaken, that was the landmark case that basically said anybody can carry a gun, anybody can be considered militia, even though you're not part of any militia. And then he proceeded to ignore the very first few words of the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia. I've heard people say, why don't we regulate firearms like the way we regulate cars? And I'm like, that's cool. Because when you think about it, and this is a theoretical thing right here, but I go through this almost every day. I live, somewhat on the edge of a urban/rural area. I go down these country roads and I'm going like 60 miles an hour one direction. Someone else is going 60 miles an hour the other direction. And the only thing that separates us are these two yellow lines in the road, and you think at a closing speed of 120 miles an hour, if you hit that guy, you're both going to be dead. Right. I mean, but there's this implicit trust that I have. I don't even think about it half the time. I'm driving down the road. I trust the other person knows what he's doing. I trust that he's taking care of his vehicle to the point where his tire is not going to blow out or something else is going to happen. His car is going to jump over that double yellow stripe. Yeah, I keep an eye on him. When I'm driving, I always keep an eye on it just in case. But that's the sort of way I'd like to look at guns, because as I said, we live like on the edge of a rural area right here. Every November, I wake up in the morning and first thing I hear is gunshots. And it's because people behind the property here, it's actually out probably about, maybe about a half mile or so, they're hunting deer, right? And so, at first, when we first woke up in this place, the first morning we woke up in November after moving in here, my wife's like, oh, what's going on? And there's people shooting out there. She says, that firecrackers or those guns? I said, oh, those are guns. I can tell the difference between the two shots, between a firecracker and a gun. She's like, what's going on? I said, oh, they're hunting deer. And she's like, well, this is kind of bad. I said, well, I trust these guys know what they're doing. Not all of them know what they're doing. I'm sure that's what the government has to build itself on, is trust. Trust in its people. Make sure that the rules and regulations are there so that we do have that yellow stripe going down the center of the road. We don't speed. We have cops out there to enforce it. But within those boundaries, there's an awful lot of freedom. And we should all agree on that, there's certain regulations we adhere to. So that's sort of my argument against, the DC versus Heller in the Second Amendment. And nobody wants a kid to get a gun and go to school and start shooting people, right? So the question is, how do we stop that? And I think regulations will help. It won't stop it ultimately. People say, well, that's not going to stop everything. If someone really wants to, they're going to. But it's like anything else in life. The more difficult you make it, the less people are actually going to go through it to do it.
Right. Look, people, for those of you who think all progressives are whack jobs and all that, so far I'm hearing here are very rational points. Some can even say, get ready for your cringe, common sense to some extent,
Exactly.
But listen, some issues I'm left, and I'm going to say it again. Healthcare, I want the progressives to actually win on that issue. I'm actually rooting for them, as this is coming from a moderate, independent. As I said, yes, we need a new idea. Okay, I know this is a little random, but we need radical change, because this private sector employer-based healthcare system it's
a disaster.
It is.
It's an absolute disaster. And I have so many stories about it, but I gave you a financial story. Before you started recording here, we talked a little bit about this topic, and I said, I'm going to make a conservative case for universal health care. Here's my conservative case. Let's just compare the United States to every other industrial nation out there. We pay, on the average, $12,000 per person per year for healthcare. Now, where does that money come from? It comes from us. Eventually it comes from us. We're the ones paying for it. We do it through insurance. We do it every time we go to see the doctor and we have to pay the copay. Your kid breaks his arm, that life happens like that, right? You get cancer or something like that. You're going to need maybe $100,000 worth of treatment to get you back on your feet again. This is the way America goes. We're fighting two problems here. One is medical procedures themselves are increasingly expensive. And I'm not really sure how to get my arms around that, why that is. But I suspect a lot of it has to do with liability insurance. But the other part is the insurance companies. If we're paying that much for healthcare, and if you think about how much healthcare do you need, I don't know about you, but for me over the past year, I just qualified for Medicare recently. I've probably taken maybe $2,000 or $3,000 worth. I had a case of bursitis in my shoulder and usual checkups, and I'd say maximum $3,000. So there's another $9,000 that essentially, in a way, I'm paying for being a citizen. Other countries in the world are down to like at least $6,000. Like Canada is down to that's half of that. And they have what people will call socialized medicine. Well, it really isn't socialized medicine. What it really is it's the hospitals and the doctors. They all work for themselves. They have their own centers where they work. It's a single payer system. So the government, through tax money or whatever, pays single payer, but now they're paying $6,000 per person rather than $12,000. Now, so right away you're saving $6,000. That's a conservative argument for me. You're saving money, saving a lot of money. And these multimillionaire insurance executives are not buying their boats every summer. Look at how much these guys get paid, how much money they're sucking out from your healthcare. Another criticism about Canada, I've heard this a lot. They say, well, you have to wait forever to get a procedure done. And that's true for things like what they call optional procedures. So let's say you have your meniscus is torn or something like that. Okay, they're going to put you in the queue. And you're going to probably wait about 5 or 6 months. So you're limping for 5 or 6 months. You got to bandage up your knee. If it becomes really, really bad, they'll get you in right away. But if you have something like a heart attack or something that needs attention right away, you get cancer or something, they're right on top of it. And that's not different from America, too. It's just you're going to pay a whole lot more for it. So yeah, in America, you wait also for optional sort of procedures as well. So I think we're essentially we're not getting any more quality and I'm just picking on Canada right now, but we're not getting any more quality from our healthcare than Canada is, but we're paying twice as much for it.
Some can even debate the outcomes are even more disastrous.
Yeah.
Despite paying for more. I mean, logically, you would expect paying for more will have better outcomes. But sadly, truth is stranger than fiction sometimes. That tends to be the case.
Paying more doesn't necessarily guarantee a better outcome. There's a lot of variables. One of them is my other shoulder. I busted that thing really bad, like back in 2017, and literally needed surgery. And I said, well, I'll just find out who my doctor recommends. Well, my wife, fortunately, she worked in a hospital at the time in the administration part. She said, no, I'm going to find you the right doctor. And she called around and found a really good guy. Was able to get me in a pretty reasonable amount of time, like within like 2 weeks, and did an excellent job. So, but I've heard horror stories about other doctors. Yeah, it's random luck. I think you're going to get that whether you're in Canada or UK or the Netherlands or whatever.
Yep. The reason I'm talking about this, Americans, because some of us may think we have an idea what it is. Let's be honest, a lot of us don't unless you have actually traveled. And this is a if, feel free to correct me here because I'm going out of a limb. If they allow, tourists, even foreigners, just to use their hospital, which I know Europe, especially UK, I know they allow that for sure because I've talked to people who've traveled and I want to travel at some point to broaden my horizons even more. And I just think, man, America, I mean, we could do so much better, but I just think, like you said, you already said it's an insurance company. These middle people just sucking so much money into the freaking top, right? Yeah. And I think that's the big issue compared to a lot of these other, I mean, not just issue, but that's the biggest differentiator compared to all these other developed nations. They have more of a government run, single payer, public run, healthcare system as opposed to having corporations and insurance be involved and, just grabbing money and finding exploitations to suck the most money without providing much effort. Maximize extraction of profit.
Yeah, you've also hit upon something else too, like where the money goes. And there's always going to be a case of corruption. And one of the criticisms I hear is that, well, how do you keep the government is corrupt? How do you keep the Medicare system from getting corrupt? I'd say, well, look at Medicare. They've actually done a pretty good job there when you think about it. And the amount of money that they take out, somewhere around 2% versus your insurance companies are taking up to 25%. So that's just on the surface. Well, maybe the companies are corrupt, but they're taking your money anyways. They're doing it in plain sight. It's and the sad thing is it comes right down to it. I don't know what it's like up in New York, but in Missouri here, we have some rural areas that are basically hospital deserts. We have rural hospitals and health clinics that are closing at a fairly rapid rate. And where do these people go? And I don't know if you've ever been on a farm. I never spent much time on a farm myself, but one thing I know about farming, it is frickin' dangerous. It's dangerous work. You might, you're sitting on a combine harvester or something like that. Or you're out in the field hacking away at something or whatever. I mean, these guys are always working and they're working with big machines the whole time, and accidents happen. And when they happen, if your closest clinic is the next city over, which could be like 150 miles away, or if you have a heart attack, I mean, maybe not where you just get a heart attack or something, you're probably not going to make it. And I don't, running for state legislature in Missouri, I'm not really sure at this point how to address that. I'm not sure if building health clinics is the right idea at this point, but having perhaps a rapid transportation system, medevac or something like that, that's affordable. They don't charge you $10,000 for a helicopter ride or something like that. I'd like to see something like that put in place in the interim until we can resolve the situation once and for all. But it's upstate New York, I mean, you guys have a lot of rural areas up there too. I mean, it's the same sort of story up there, I'm sure.
Yep. The only enlightenment I'm going to provide just for the urban perspective. We have a kind of a different issue. Hospitals get overcrowded.
Yeah.
Okay. It's turned, well, during pandemic, it was already overwhelmed and all that. And I already have said we should have built nationwide capacity, especially for deserts, at least 30%. I mean, and I still stick to that to this day, but nope. I hate to go back to the pandemic, but the pandemic exposed or what's the word I'm looking for? It made us pay attention to the issues. It just not even magnify, because magnify is not the right word. It just brought it back to the forefront about what kind of problems we have, because we've been pushing it aside. And then the pandemic was a great example that exposes our inadequacies and our inefficiencies and our lack of capability. So that's a lesson that I think people should remember. Oh, the pandemic's over with. No. We're gonna do that. We're gonna go back to the same stupidity. We need to be better from it, not going back to the same nonsense. And I see that that's happening. So I'm very disgusted. They should be building more hospitals. In general. And transportation too, which I like that you pointed out. Have those. So I think transportation, I like that should be kind of first, and then maybe build like more like clinics, but I'm not sure it's possible to do both at the same time. It would be ideal, to be honest, but
I think see. For me, it's just a matter of coming up with these ideas and pitching them and finding out if we can get some sort of a groundswell going. The idea of having a transportation system like a medevac system, or maybe like a rural hospital on wheels or something like that would just be available. These are interim solutions, of course, but I don't know if they're the best solutions, but certainly want to open up the dialogue and start talking about it, because if we don't talk about it, it's going to be bad. Now, you also brought up the pandemic, and boy, oh boy, that exposed so many systemic problems in our nation. And one of them is, going back to my engineering days, I used to work for military contractors, and we would have to build every component that we purchase, every component that went into. I used to work like on flight systems, aviation systems, and every little component, like capacitor or resistor, whatever you throw into this design, had to be sourced in the United States and had to have a second source in the United States. And it was a pain in the what to go through all this stuff as an engineer. I just want to design stuff, right? And you end up doing all this paperwork. But, with the pandemic, what that exposed was we dropped that requirement, not only somewhat in military, but also especially in consumer electronics for cars and other, even just regular computers and cell phones and so on. The politicians sort of looked the other way, and they let every integrated chip, not every, but a majority of them being manufactured by TSMC, which is the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing. And now we're seeing, China may be attacking Taiwan or something, or maybe influencing or putting Taiwan under some sort of a bubble or something. This is a real big issue. And I have to ask you, how did the politicians allow this to happen? We go back to medicine, to hospitals. A lot of our medicines, the base elements for our medicines are manufactured, guess where? 2 different countries, China and India. And we have very tenuous relationships with China right now. Trump keeps poking a stick at them, and and so they're taking all their business. agriculture business and so on, and pushing it to different nations. But what people aren't talking about is some of the base chemicals to make some of the things like insulin, for example, comes from China, comes from India. And our relationship with India is not all that hot at the moment either. These are big issues. And if you look at it from a pure capitalistic perspective, they say, well, we're saving money by doing this. Why, what government's going to tell us to stop saving money? We're saving money by outsourcing all this stuff. But nobody's looking at the vulnerability of all of it. So when the pandemic hits, we got issues with medicine, we got issues with components for cars. I mean, the whole thing, and it just blew up everything, and the supply lines just shut down. And this is a big issue. And again, I don't blame capitalism. I don't blame the guys working at these companies trying to optimize their costs, but I do blame the politicians. I say, you guys are supposed to be keeping an eye on this stuff and making sure that these kind of things don't happen. And I don't know why. I suspect a lot of it had to do with lobbyist dollars and so on, that they just turned their backs on it and allowed this to happen. And so, when COVID hit, it was nutty. It was just crazy. So.
Oh yeah, I want to zero in on the Missouri politics stuff because you're Iran. I mean, spoiler for anyone who hasn't been paying attention, it flopped. I mean, it's predictable. Don't bash him, okay? I just think more people from the losing party should run more often. Give it a shot because change can happen, okay? That's all I'm going to say about that. But before I could go on this long monologue, because I don't want that to be, what gives you confidence to run for 2026 again for that same office?
I think I'll come into it with more experience, for one thing. Another thing, a dynamic thing that just happened was my opponent decided to run for a state Senate position. So he's the incumbent. So he's out, right? And another opponent has taken his place, and I ended up having lunch with him last week. We talked quite a bit, actually. We don't give away secrets or anything like that, but we do get to know each other. And so I think it's going to be more of an even playing field this next time around. Missouri has done a couple things over this past year, this past legislative session, that has been notoriously unpopular. It was driven all by the Republicans. Missouri was the first state to make abortion illegal. Within hours of the reversal of Roe v. Wade, there was a trigger law in Missouri which made abortion illegal immediately. So Missouri is also a state that has the initiative petition. So people went out and got a bunch of signatures and they made abortion legal. It was a long story there, but it came up on the November ballot last November. People voted for it and made abortion legal. They wrote it right into the Missouri Constitution. Well, guess what happens? The Republicans are trying to back this thing out. They wrote a counter bill. Now, the thing is, Republicans can't change, legislators cannot change the Constitution directly. I don't think any state legislature can. They have to go through the people. But the legislature can create ballot issues that will change a constitution. So they created their own ballot issue, and they put all kinds of wording in it that made it extremely misleading. And then they passed another law that allows them to make the wording misleading. So it's going to appear on the ballot again. And the final kicker was the Missouri Supreme Court, for some crazy reason, made abortion illegal again. They said, well, we got all these rules, all these laws in the books that were from the era when abortion was illegal. You guys haven't removed those laws from the books yet, so abortion will remain illegal and we can enforce it. This just happened a couple of weeks ago, and people aren't talking about that, but the people that are paying attention are extremely mad, even Republicans, extremely angry at this point. Republicans, again, we voted for a statutory vote last time around, which would have raised the minimum wage and also allow for what we call earned sick leave. For every 30 hours you work, you get 1 hour of sick leave, etc. And we would also raise the minimum wage with the inflation every year. The Republicans took about 3 months to back that whole thing out because it was a statutory change, again, driven by the people using an initiative petition, made a statutory change. In other words, a change in the law, not in the Constitution. 3 months later, the Republicans backed it all out, except for one thing. They let it go up to I think the minimum wage, let it crawl up to $15 an hour. But they removed the earned sick leave. They removed tacking the minimum wage to the inflation rate. So they've done some other things like this, and people are just furious. Even Republicans are furious about this. And Missouri always votes, when they vote on issues, they always vote progressive. So they voted for a couple of progressive issues, and the Republicans wiped it all out. So that is kind of a long-winded explanation, but I think that'll give me an advantage next time around.
No, that certainly sounds more hopeful. You never know. Upsets have happened.
Yeah.
Upsets have happened. It's just that this is a hot take. Voters need to pay attention. Stop voting with familiar crap. Give new people a chance, because 80% of voters, doesn't matter if it's local all the way to federal, people will vote with what they're familiar with.
Yeah.
80% of the time. We need to change that. That's our responsibility as voters. I don't care, you're left, right, center, or up in the sky. Okay,
Yeah.
just look at the candidates, and if you don't know, go to trusted news sources like Ground News, 1440, even Brute America. Those are some good sources that are sound. Even the new paper, which I'm going to put in a link right now. Short, straight to the point, because I know you say it's busy. I don't have time. Well, I got a solution for you. The most you need is 5 minutes. And that's if you want to look through the whole thing. But if you just care about politics, 30 seconds to a minute, tops.
Yeah.
Okay. Or stock, another 30 seconds to top. So that's all I'm going to say. I normally don't do shameless plug-in prematurely, but I think those are ways to combat that and stop relying on mainstream media. I don't care if it's left, right, left leaning, right leaning, to make the decisions for you, because they got their own agenda, and you should go what's right for you. If you want more benefits, you know what party to vote for there. Okay. If you want more religious liberties, you know what party to vote for, right? Just go by issues that you care about and just stick to that. And hopefully the candidate doesn't have too many skeletons in their closet. Easier said than done these days. I'll say that much.
One of the mistakes I know politicians make is they assume everybody is a well-informed voter, and the reality is most people aren't. And I think that's an attribute of having a free society. We can go about our lives and not have to worry too much about it, and we pretty much make up our mind like a couple of days before we vote, or even right there at the voting booth. We just look at the issues and we just vote on them. So I think it's one of the mistakes Democrats have made. We talked about this earlier. They assume every voter is high information. Republicans are again, they have the messaging machine that assumes people don't know that much about politics. So they tell stories, they make it interesting. Yeah, obviously the stories are slanted toward them. But they get these buzzwords out there, like Little Marco or something like that. Just the little buzzwords out there that really make America great again. I mean, you couldn't come up with a better phrase. It doesn't make any sense when you think about it, but boy, it sure resonates with a lot of people out there.
Yeah, I'll just say the Republicans just have more of a simple, digestible, accessible messaging.
Yes.
That's it, and I say that's my biggest issue with Democrats, because Democrats, you got policies that are popular, but they don't like your politician. That's what some of these, you touched on that. And I perfectly, I was nodding almost passionately and say, yes. You see, I'm talking to a progressive here, and he has not, he might slant a few things, but it's okay. I'm not expecting unbiased person here. Let's be real. But he's not spreading misinformation on them as well. And I could tell the difference. Can you tell the difference? I want to see how informed you are. If you're brave enough, put in the comment section what part they think he slanted on, whatever. Look, if you call us both stupid and your mama's fat, anything like that, I'm going to ignore it. I'm not going to bring it to his attention. I'm just going to say the haters have spoken. That's the most I'm going to mention, the haters or the trolls, whatever label I'm going to give you. But you're not helping out. I'll just laugh, because I've been called a bunch of names. I've been called even the R word, which I laugh. I received it right there live. I was just laughing, because I say, you're a coward, you're miserable, apparently, and you're not gonna face me. You feel that way. You feel like crap. You're not gonna project that to me, okay? And definitely not to this guest here. And I'm sure he got wisdom that he could share with you. I don't care if you don't like his politics. To me, that's a secondary. I just care about the person's character, what they have, what value they have to share. I care more about the ideas, all that good stuff. So. Now, we already talked about the cult, extremism, and all that. I should tie this question earlier, but hey, better late than never. How can regular, ordinary people fight against extremism, local and state governments?
I think the first step is to become aware of it, what it is and what's being asked for. And what I mean by what's being asked, what are politicians asking you to believe? And if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. There's something in there. And it takes a lot of reflection, I think, sometimes to understand sometimes when someone's being extremist. And extremism is extremely it's kind of a poor choice of words, but it's extremely seductive in many ways because it gives you the simple answer. You're suffering from your personal finances, you're suffering because there's another guy with dark skin that's taking your job. You're not getting health care, but there's these other people over there that are jumping across the border and getting free health care. It's all a lie. I can prove it. It's all a lie. But those are the simple answers. And so when people start hearing these types of messages, you have to, your radar should go up. And I think that's the best way to fight extremism on either end, right? We're seeing it now more on the right than on the left, but extremism on either end is very seductive, gives you the simple answer. And if you're alive for more than like a year, you know that nothing is simple. Everything's got a story behind it. So don't accept the simple answers.
Exactly. Well, that and ironically, that's a simple way to put it.
Don't accept simple answers, except that one.
Yeah, right. That's the exception, okay? So, wow, we actually went through quite a bit in such a time. Yeah, wow. That's all I gotta say. I'm actually impressed. I mean,
Oh,
don't.
it's been a great talk. I love
Yeah,
this.
we
I
touched
could
it.
talk for another 3 or 4 hours, man, but I know you don't have that much airtime.
I mean, I could make certain exceptions, not 3, 4 hours, maybe 1 hour, maybe another 30 minutes, but definitely, I'm not Joe Rogan here. That's for sure. He can go on those marathon talks and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Me, I got an attention span of a dying goldfish at times. It's like, listen, no, if you want to see your host get mentally ill, make clips, viral clips, make fun of me, yeah, torture me for 3 hours. You're gonna get viral clips. I guarantee it. All right.
If I
But
get paid as much as him, man, I'd be on the air for 3 hours too. I don't care what they'd say about me.
right, exactly. Yeah, if I was a millionaire, this would be easily 2, 3 hours, no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No
just
problem.
where's that contract? What? But that's not most of us. 99.99% of us are not Joe Rogan. That's a true statistic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a labor of love.
Yeah.
Podcasting is a labor of love.
It is for sure. It is. I mean, if anyone says otherwise, they're not a true podcaster. Yes, you've been exposed. For those of you who disagree, I might make a podcast cult. No, I'm kidding. That's just hypocritical at this point. I'm anti-cult. I don't like it. I like to even challenge my own views. That's how I get wires about these issues. Because I almost fell for the extreme left, even the extreme right talking points and so forth. So wait a minute. I start thinking, wait, that's not true. Once I look it up, you debunk so many points. Go to someone you trust. Go to a fair article and do the research yourself if you can. I know some of you don't have time. But go to someone who's very knowledgeable on a certain issue like abortion. Talk to someone who has done abortions, or or a lawyer who knows the laws around that. You got to be your own advocate, because to be honest, everyone got their own interests. Let's just be clear about
Yeah,
that. I mean,
that's especially true online with social media. You can get trapped into these. Speaking about seduction, you can get
right.
seduced into these echo chambers an awful lot.
Yeah.
And I still read, like, there's this news organization called Newsmax, and they're fairly extremist, I think. But I still read their stuff, not all the time, but I still read their stuff. I just want to know what they're thinking, and consider some of the ideas they put out there.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you another example too, which I don't mean to ramble too much, but we were talking about the pandemic earlier. When it first came out, when COVID first came out, they said, "Oh, this comes from the Wuhan wet market." I'm like, that sounds reasonable, because I'd read articles before where these markets that bring in these animals from the fringes of the forests or whatever, bringing in unknown viruses. So that resonated with me at first. Then I found out there was like this big virology research lab in Wuhan as well. And then right around that time, this so-called conspiracy theory comes out and says, "Yeah, we think it was this lab," right? And of course, all the people say, "No, it couldn't have come from the lab." And I'm like, no. Sometimes conspiracy theories actually come true, and sometimes they actually make sense. So those kind of things can happen too. But it all comes down to researching, and like you say, you don't have to be an expert at it, but get out of your shell, get out of these social media channels, and talk to some real people.
Yep, and challenge even your own narrative. I know that's so uncomfortable for somebody. I mean, I'm happy I did, because I didn't like being challenged, because I used to be, let's see. Oh, Environmentalism, you'll talk to me as a teenager, you'll thought the most radical right. I said, leave me alone, man. I'm a teenager. I'm just trying to have fun. I don't care about pollution, all that. The earth will clean itself.
Yeah.
No, after
Yeah.
I look into it, I shift to the left when it comes to environmentalism. I mean, I don't agree with every single policy, but generally, I'll say I'll lean like center left when it comes to environment. I say we do need clear energy. We definitely need to take care of Earth much better. I mean, to me, that's good enough. I don't need all these political wording and political correctness. That part, that's why I consider myself in the center. Is I don't need all these buzzwords from the left. I put that away. Care for Earth, clean energy. Speaking practical, see that you had universal health care and a more conservative case for it. I mean, if you could make it either plainer than that, instead of just a left wing, right wing flair to it, I think more people could be convinced instead of just using these buzzwords because it throws people off. It definitely throws me off. I said, okay, this is a politician. What the heck do you want? So messaging is important. That's why I'm saying this, and that's all I'm going to say. So I'm going to give you quick statistics before I wrap. Before asking for anything else, it's probably a gutsy question about the Missouri by the Missouri government, okay? And just like any other state government, they have their lower chamber and the upper chamber. As of now, they have 24 Republicans in the Senate and 10 Democrats. So that means
Yeah.
Republicans got a super majority in the Senate.
Correct.
The Missouri State Senate. This is not the the Senate of the Capitol building. No, this is the Missouri State.
Missouri State Senate.
Yep, Missouri State Senate. Okay.
Right.
And for the House of Representatives, it's even crazier there. There's 163 seats altogether. Republicans got 110, Dems with 52, and there's one vacant. Yeah, so they almost got like 3/4 right there in the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
So it's a red state, but I do see that their supermajority influence is slowly chipping away. Especially they keep being radical and keep pushing unpopular policies. To me, that's their detriment. Of Republicans, your policies is more your weakness because it's too simplistic. Some of it's even extreme, and it's too restrictive. I mean, you're either too free or too restrictive. I think they don't trust the nuances as well as the Democrats. That part I always give the Democrats credit. They're more detail oriented when it comes to policies. That's why sometimes I'm going to side with Democrats on some of the issues. I mean, and there's some issues. I mean, when it comes to, you said you're a fiscal conservative, that part I always agree with Republicans in general, even though they're not practicing that right now. Look what they try to pass a big, beautiful bill, right? So, and that's going to drive up the debt for another $4 trillion. So, oh, fiscal conservatives out the window for the 1,000th time for the Republicans, right? Yeah, so that means I'm more right wing than a Republican politician when it comes to that issue. I was like, wow, what happened to reducing? What happened? Doge was for nothing. No wonder Elon Musk lost his cool right there and started attacking Trump.
That's true.
I don't like both of them, but I understand why. Before I wrap this up, something popped up. You talked about the protests. Well, I'll just get your take on that from for someone who actually lived in California. Before I address that, I know some of your haters are gonna think that California brainwashed him or something like that. That's okay. I'm sure he's heard it 1,000 times. So yeah, but go ahead.
Well, LA is a extremely large city. I think the metropolitan area is like 8 million people. And then there's rings of villages and towns around it. The whole thing, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but I wouldn't doubt if you get up to around 12 million. People don't really understand what that means. And one way to get your head around it is if you fly into Los Angeles at night, you come out of the clouds and there's nothing but this huge carpet of lights as far as you can see, going to horizon. And I remember when I first moved out there, I had that experience. It is huge. And the city is not like it's not built like New York City. Los Angeles has a fairly small downtown area where you have these high-rise buildings. They tend to spread out because they have the real estate available. It may have to do with earthquakes and stuff like that. So when they talk about the protests and they gave the location of the protests, I'm not highly familiar with downtown LA area, but I just know from listening to it, like, okay, this is just like 1 or 2 blocks, and there's tens of thousands of blocks there. So the news reporters tend to focus on where the trouble is. So if there's a trash can on fire or something like that, you're going to get 20 cameras surrounding it, looking at it and saying, oh, this is LA. It doesn't help when Trump says things like LA is on fire, etc. That is totally not the case. I was out there during the Rodney King riots as well. And that was a much larger situation. That was actually a riot. This is really a kind of a protest. The riots were actually much more widespread, but even then, it was containable. So I just kind of laugh when people talk about Los Angeles and talk about how the protests are out of hand. All you got to do is pull up TikTok or something like that, get some live video. Most of the people are just standing around holding signs and chanting and things like that. So it's just completely overblown. So I think when you call in like 4,000 military personnel to patrol streets, there's going to be more military people there than there are going to be protesters. It's overblown, but I think it's purposely overblown, not only by the media, but I think by certain politicians that want it to be overblown. Another thing I know about LA, and it's probably, I'm sure the same thing is with New York as well. They don't tolerate outsiders very well. If you come in from the outside, you got to show a little bit of respect, as I was when I first arrived there. But I guess I'm talking about more about agitators that come in and try to grab people off the streets. I've seen it happen in New Jersey. I've seen it happen in New York and Minneapolis. Nothing gets people going quicker than that. And you don't even care who the guy is that's being snatched off the street. You're going to get your ass out there and you're going to try to stand in the way and gum up the works as much as possible. That's just common sense. That's just being good citizens of our communities. And so I'm very proud. I'm very proud of LA, what they've done. I'm very proud of the way they've handled it. I'm very proud to see Gavin Newsom. I'm not a big fan of his, but I think he had some very good things to say over the last few days. And it makes me proud to be, like I say, I consider myself native of both states. My son was born out there, raised him out there, and he still lives out there. I still have some flesh and blood out there.
Yep, you're intimately connected with California. There's no denying that.
Yeah, it's it's
even if your son moves, there's still going to be a history connection right there.
Oh yeah, I miss it. I don't. The climate is kind of different. I mean, the climate in Missouri is no doubt it's more exciting, perhaps too exciting. We had a few tornadoes come through here recently, but I miss the vibe out there. I miss the state. And what people don't realize is you can focus in on places like West Hollywood or even just regular Hollywood, and you think this is all a bunch of kooks out there. But really, when I moved out there in the 80s, the big industry out there was national defense. And so you got a lot of conservatives out there. I lived in one of the outlying areas. I lived out in Ventura County for many years. They're just normal, hardworking people out there. There's nothing foofy about them at all. You get a small crowd of people, but they get all the attention. Most of them out there are just hardworking Americans, and they just want what everybody else wants.
No doubt about that. It's true. The media, anything that generates attention ratings, blowing up stuff.
Yeah.
Or fights, fight with the officers, anything chaotic. I mean, they only care about race. They don't care about truth. I mean, they always done that. It doesn't matter if it's, left leaning, right leaning, or different issues. They just want the most violent, chaotic images that they could.
Well, that's what sells clicks. It sells audience, so they can turn around and sell you soap and pills and everything else, beer, whatever.
Yeah, right. And anything just to get another dollar out of you.
Exactly.
Right. So, I thank you for that, because I'm just gathering my perspective. I already know how Fox is covering it. I already know how someone cover it. I say, yeah, I already know how you're going to cover it. I'm sure, the ones who are doing peaceful protests, they're not going to get the coverage. That's boring. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the media. That's the media's perspective. That's always going to be the case unless you get more, I would say, informative, gutsy citizen journalists, if you will. That gives you more of a broader perspective. They're also going to show the civilized people who's protesting responsibly.
Right.
I hate to say that. Of course, I'm against the violence. But we do have the right to protest. I mean, how else are you going to address grievances in a collective and I would say pretty effective manner sometimes? So, that's part of 1A. No, 1A right there.
Yeah. Well, one of the best things I saw, I saw it on TikTok. I think it's on Facebook as well. But a young man standing, it was the LA protests, and he was standing on like a slight berm, looking down at this parking lot, and there's all these National Guard people down there, and he was talking to them, saying, you guys, you're on the wrong side of history. He says, but we respect you guys. We totally respect you guys. We know you're here to do a job. We know you don't have a choice, but we also asking you to make a moral decision here. These are your people you're talking with. You're looking at us. You got the weapons. You're looking at ordinary citizens here who just want what's best for their nation. in their community. And I thought that was he went on for like 5 minutes or so, and I thought, wow, this guy, it was all impromptu on his side. It was all very contemporaneous, and he just said it, and it was like, man, that's like the culmination of the protests out there. That's the part that doesn't get on the TV cameras.
Dang, I only want
It's too
ratings.
boring.
Yeah, boy. Sadly, that's true. But hey, just keep doing the work. Just keep protest what you believe in. I don't have to agree with it, but I do respect the right. But this one I actually agree with, minus the violence. But other than that, I agree. Just remove the violent part. That's
Yeah,
it. And keep the protests. That's it. That's common sense. That's rational, and all that good stuff.
absolutely.
Anything you want to add before I wrap this up?
Just in case anybody's interested, my website is dan4mo.com. That's DAN, the number 4MO, which is the Missouri abbreviation. I don't know where they get the O from, but dan4mo.com. And you go to that site there, and then from there you can kind of branch out to the other sites. I have Facebook page. I have a page where I publish all my writings. I mean, just a TikTok page and things like that. So I got all the branch outs from there. But yeah, just go to dan4mo.com. There's a ton of information there. All my writing, a lot of my writings are there. So you get an idea of who I am. It's not your typical political website where they just have like one page and they put the bullet points in there and that's it, because maybe they don't want you to know more about it. I want people to know a lot about me. I want people to know what they're voting for. I want them to have too much information rather than not enough. So dan4mo.com, and yeah, just go from there.
Yeah, that's transparency right there.
Yeah,
Come on,
absolutely.
and pretty darn ethical if you ask me. And you also got a Reddit. Are you currently using that as well?
Yeah, I have read it as well. I'm not as active on it. I tune into it every couple days, and sometimes I'll get into a back and forth argument with somebody, and it's not one of my most proud things to do. But yeah, I do have Reddit as well. I think I have a link to it on Reddit as well from my website.
No, yeah,
I'll double check that.
oh yeah, no, you do, you do. That's why I was
Oh,
just
okay,
asking.
okay.
You mentioned the rest, and I think YouTube as well. Well, I'm gonna link all of them regardless on the description. Give them some support. Maybe enough for you Democrats galvanize. I mean, I think this is an opportune time. You got time to gather. By the time 2026 comes, they could flip that seat blue.
Yeah,
Well,
hope
we'll
so.
see.
That's what we're
The
hoping for.
incumbent
Yeah.
is gone because he's running for the Senate position. Okay, so
Right.
so I think you have a fair shot. I actually would agree as a fair-minded person. Yeah, I think you have a shot. So come on, if you
Right.
were skeptical before, I get it. Yeah, it was super red, the incumbent, fine,
Yeah.
but I think the time is now, and especially when the next year comes, it's gonna be a pretty exciting political time for Missouri. Of course, all the House representatives in the national level, and one
Yeah.
third of the Senate. And I already gave my prediction there. I think the Republicans gonna keep the Senate, but I think the House of Representatives gonna go to Democrats. That's my prediction, my general
Yeah.
prediction.
It's not a very big barrier to overcome at this point. Just a couple of seats right now.
Yeah, no, it is. And I'll say 10 could easily flip. So there's
Yeah.
opportunity. I mean, Democrats have to strike now. They just need to organize right now.
Yeah.
There is stop the
Absolutely.
infighting, stop that nonsense. Yeah, you have your time. If Trump keeps being crazy, putting on unpopular policies, then you got a shot. Okay, you got a shot, and stop with the niche stuff, because niche stuff's not going to help you. Have
Right.
messaging that could gather a lot of people. Okay, I'll say you deal with the niche stuff once you're in office, but with
Yeah.
campaigning, you gotta gather as much people as possible. That's all. That's my advice to the Democrats. That, generally speaking, ain't more Americans you could gather, the better. All right,
Yeah.
and that includes in red states. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
Well,
So
I'd
you
say
ready?
one more thing is
Go ahead. Yep.
I tell Democrats, if you have to explain yourself, you've lost the argument. Stop explaining it. Just get your points out there first. And if somebody wants to have it explained later on, fine. But they get caught so many times. Republicans will say something about Democrats, and Democrats will have to explain themselves. Like, nope, you've lost. That's how it works.
True, and that's what molding my communication style. If I fly out to over explain, it means I lost, and look, it's falling apart already,
Yeah.
and that's why I try to keep it concise more often. And if you get it, you get it. If you don't, well, there's a comment section. What do you
Yeah.
mean by this?
Right.
Or if I'm wrong, just correct me, because I don't care about my ego.
Right.
I mean, if I did, forget it. I'll do my own monologue podcast and just talk about whatever the heck I want to talk about, and think all you people are just peons and all that. So no, I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to fight misinformation. That means put my ego aside. If
Yeah.
you really want to be authentic and true about fighting misinformation, so just say, "Oh no, I support this because it supports my narrative." No confirmation bias. That means that's another source of misinformation. Like for example, let me just use something. I could just think all progressives are wacky. They burn garbage cans, they burn hospitals, and once I see that news coverage, aha!
Yeah,
See,
exactly.
I'm right. I'm
Exactly.
correct. They're
Confirmation.
wackos. They need to be put down. No confirmation, but don't challenge your own confirmation bias. I think that's the most common bias we have. If I'm, that's all I'm
That's
going to
what
say about that.
social media feeds at, though. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what happens.
Oof. Oh
Well, is
man,
that a
this has
wrap?
been great. Yep, but I'm gonna wrap it up now for my podcast shameless plug in. Give a like, share, subscribe, give her an honest review on Apple Podcasts. If you give it on Spotify, I will happily ignore you. I don't care for Spotify. I only use that as my jam to listen to, so I'm not paying attention to that. Apple Podcasts, those are reviews I'm paying attention to, even the ones that are unreasonably too good, too positive. I like the ones that tells me why it's great, something more specific, or tell me where can I improve. I like specifics. Even if it's positive, negative, I don't really care about that as much. I like specifics. And if you think 4 stars, 4 stars, 5 star, 5 star. If it's, I'm happy to have that 1 star that person never said anything. So it's a shadow hater. I'm not, there you go. That means I'm a real podcast. Yay, a little more authenticity. I don't need perfection. I hate perfection. If I have a 5 star, I think I'm phony. I'd rather have a 4.4, 4.5 rating than a 5 because 5 is just inauthentic. I think they're going to think I pay a bunch of people. Oh, give me 5 stars. Give me 5 stars. No. So I'd rather have that messy review system as opposed to having a perfect, clean review. Okay? And then, share this with someone that you love. And that's all I can say from there. Oh, and donate if you want. That's completely optional. And you have access to the more older stuff. All right. For the first 140 episodes. And I'll start putting some exclusive stuff sometime in the future. I'm trying to figure out what. Maybe the visualization of the action Bible. I think visuals help instead of all that description that confuses people. And whether you believe in God or not, that's up to you. I'm not saying religious. I'm a spiritualist. That's about a spiritualist. Religious is just for the fakers. I'm a spiritualist. I'm walking that path and all that good stuff. And I will show some visuals about that book, the Action Bible. It's Bible in the comic book form. Yeah, more interesting. Instead of just a bunch of words that are confusing and all that. And I get that. I found the Bible confusing too when I studied it. So I think the visuals will help you out a bit, and maybe I'll do some of that from there. Who knows? And if you think I'm being too capitalistic or whatever, just call me out. I'll probably back down. Who knows? Look, you have influence here. It's not a rigged system. Well, actually, it kind of is because sometimes I bring people that you don't like because I think that's something valuable. I'll do some executive decisions, but mostly, you have influence, people. Just communicate with me and I'll be willing to work with you. All right. So, all right.
Right.
This audio and visual journey has been completed. So, whenever you're done listening or watching this podcast, you have a blessed day, afternoon, or night.
Thanks, Elias.